continues to happen is this agenda that desires to displace Christianity and the framework of the West is literally part of the plan. We learned and we found that as you present a thesis, there's always going to be an antithesis. And the end result of this thesis and the antithesis is going to be literally a compromise of the two, a synthesis. And this is something that is not necessarily good all the time. As we read the New Testament account of Babylon, we find that it is more than just a false religion. It's a system, and it's one that has been around since the days of literally the first dynasty of Babylon under Ur-Nammu, when he established the gold standard, brought back by Nebuchadnezzar. So Babylon becomes more than just this religion per se that many people would like to identify as the great whore, and they always point to the Catholic Church because she's been around the longest. I mean, it doesn't help that the Pope wore a hat that actually said mystery on it, and that these cardinals and these men in high office literally wore the fish head hat that represented Dagon throughout the days of paganism. Didn't help that they put phallic symbols all over the yard of St. Peter's Square. It didn't help that they did this, but by far that does not make the Catholic Church Babylon. As much property as the church had acquired and as much as the church had brought in terms of income and assets, they've been outdone by people like McDonald's and various other companies as far as their real estate holdings are concerned. So the Catholic Church is not that great harlot of Revelation. We're finding that it's a much bigger system. We're finding that harlot is much more than a religion, but it's a system that literally envelops or desires to envelop the whole world. Now, as we were reading about Hitler, and we'll go back to our studies, we were reading out of Rule by Secrecy, and we were talking about how this system that was set in motion, that was set in place, it literally reaches into every aspect of human life. And I don't think anybody wants to face that, because we all came up through some of these institutions. And then many of us are part of these groups or have been part of these groups that are nothing more than part of the tentacles of these particular organizations. And we were reading out of Pat Buchanan's Death of the West, and a lot of people hate this guy. He's an intellectual. They referred to him as a Nazi, a fascist. But again, we were talking last week about how they deal with things nowadays. If you have an intelligent argument, they just call you a fascist. They call you a Nazi. They call you a bigot. Right? I mean, a guy could take a fella into the closet, bend him over, and if you say he's a pervert, there's something wrong with him, they turn around and say, what are you, a homophobe? And suddenly you got a problem. Nobody, in fact, everybody will take up for this fella in the closet and beat you up for being a homophobe. So suddenly the shoe's on the other foot. Now you're going to spend your life rocked back on your heels trying to defend why you said you're not acceptant or tolerant of that stuff. Because you're a homophobe. Now something's wrong with you. Isn't that the way it is? If you say concerning something a woman does, say she should have listened to her husband, and suddenly they say, you're a misogynist. You hate women, don't you? You're a woman hater. You're a woman basher. And all of a sudden, again, you're rocked back on your heels. There's no intelligent argument made as to why they called you that, or there isn't any intelligence behind their statements as to why you're wrong. They call you a name, you're rocked back on your heels, and now all you can do is try to defend the fact that you're not wearing a Klansman hat behind closed doors. You're going to have to defend the fact that you're not a wife beater. And they just sit back and laugh. Now, before we get any further, let's just do a little review here. Let's see. Pawns in the game. Because remember, one of the things that we're getting out of this, and we're doing the same thing on Sunday, and it's, I never would have anticipated that the two would merge continuously, but as we go through these studies, we're finding out that there's a lot of intersecting taking place here. And we're finding that these two distinct series are continually meeting in areas where we're able to see commonalities, literally a common thread that goes through this whole series. In Pawns in the Game, as we were reading about the Russians and their establishment of their pre-revolution government, we studied and we found that as the Jews in Russia began to prosper, they suddenly became prominent businessmen. They became the prominent students. They took the prominent posts and positions. In chapter 7 of Pawns in the Game, just for quick review, the invasion of Russia in 1812 by Napoleon shook the Russian people to the core. Tsar Alexander the first set about the task of reorganizing a recovery program in the hope that he could bring about a united effort through the Russian Empire. He relaxed many of the restrictions which had been imposed on the Jews when they were confined to the Pale of Settlement in 1772. Special concessions were made to establish the Jews in agriculture. Under Alexander I, they were given every encouragement to assimilate themselves to the Russian way of life. Now listen, this is why I say they intersect. Because the Jews are in Russia. Now listen, there's something about Jews anywhere in the world that is supposed to make them distinct and separate from everybody. They have a legacy in God that literally goes beyond anybody's realm of religion and imagination. Because God started with a guy named Abraham, who literally descended from Adam. So when you say you're a Jew, in essence what you're saying is that you believe in the creation epic of Genesis that says God in the beginning of the creation of the heaven and the earth, and how in 7 days He created everything, including the man. And from that man, Adam, came descendants to Terah, to Abraham, to whom God came to and said, I found you an upright man. I'm going to cut covenant with you. From Abraham comes Isaac, Jacob, whose name becomes Israel, who has 12 sons. So anybody who's a Jew understands this legacy, that it was to Abraham that God came, that the promised child was his son Isaac. From Isaac came Jacob, Israel. From Israel came his 12 sons, or the 12 tribes. From them came the history or the legacy of Israel. When we talk about the defeat of Egypt, when they crossed the Red Sea, when we talk about how God literally destroyed the walls of Jericho and gave them the land of promise, all of this is part of their legacy. So here you've got Jews who are God's promise or God's covenant people, and now they're in Russia. Now, it doesn't matter what part of the world a Jew is in, a Jew's legacy is always going to be the same. He believes in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He believes that as a Jew, he has covenants. He has promises. He has literally an inside advantage that other peoples don't have. So the Jews are in Russia. Now what happens everywhere the Jews go? For example, when the Jews were in Egypt, what happened to the Jews in Egypt? When Abraham's sons came into Egypt, Jacob's sons came into Egypt. Remember, they kept Benjamin hostage. He's crying, oh, they killed Joseph. Now they killed Benjamin, my youngest. And then it turns out that Joseph was already there, and Joseph was the second in charge of Egypt. And as they came into Egypt, literally to redeem or to regain the sons that were held captive, Joseph broke down and showed himself to his brothers. And they were given the best of the land in Egypt. And what happened in Egypt? We read in history, they don't call them Jews. They're referred to as the Hyksos kings. But what did they do? They basically had everything, right? We read the story of Jacob working for Laban, and Jacob's working for Laban, and even the speckled cattle That cattle which was regarded as inferior, that Laban made this deal. Hey, whatever comes out over here speckled and grizzled, you can have. I get the rest. What ended up happening to Jacob? Everything he touched prospered. So everywhere God's people goes, everywhere they go, what ends up happening? They end up prospering. So they're here in Russia. They can't deny their legacy. After Napoleon's invasion, the Russians say, we got to bring back some semblance of civilization here. We got to kind of kickstart our economy. So rather than to persecute and keep those Jews in these makeshift ghettos, they said, we're going to make government provisions for the Jew, and we're going to give them an inside track to agriculture. Nicholas I succeeded Alexander I in 1825. He was less inclined to favor the Jews because he viewed their rapid inroads into the Russian economy with alarm. It's no different than that second Pharaoh who comes in and realizes, hey, we're Egyptians. These are foreign rulers, but they have everything. His government viewed with great displeasure the determination of the Jews to maintain their separate culture, language, mode of dress, etc. So what was his problem with the Jews? They have a separate culture, a separate language, a way they dress, a belief system, food laws. They take Saturday off. They have a whole different way of doing things. So you've got Jews in Russia. They relax regulations to allow them to participate in the economy. And suddenly, boom, like a rocket, they rise into prominence. Here comes the next czar who says, hey, I don't like these people. They're not like us. They're different. They don't dress like us. They don't eat like us. They don't do things like we do. We got to do something about this. They make us look bad. In order to try to assimilate the Jews into the Russian society, Nicholas I in 1804 made it compulsory for all Jewish children to attend public school. Nicholas thought that if the young could be convinced they would be welcome into Russian society, it would go a long way to eliminate misunderstandings. His avowed purpose was to offset the one-sided story of religious persecution, which was drilled into their minds since infancy. Now, what's at stake? What is the czar doing? What the czar is doing is very simple. He says, we're going to get the Jewish kids in school. We're going to deal with the minds of the kids. And what we're going to do is we're going to pound out of their brains that story that they keep hearing over and over and over again about how they're a persecuted people. You know, every time they do that Passover, they talk about Egypt. Every time they talk about Yom Kippur, they're talking about how they retook the temple. Every time they do these things, all they talk about is how persecuted they are. But isn't that what God demands of the father of every Jew in the Word of God? Isn't that what God demands? You teach them. You lay down the legacy. That's what Psalm 78 is about. You have got to lay down the legacy. To not do so is to be called or to be viewed on by God as an unbeliever. A crappy father. So these Russians, they in essence say, we're going to put these kids in school. And we're going to pound out of them that idea that they're persecuted. Now everywhere they go, aren't they persecuted? Their whole history is persecution. Persecution by Egypt, persecution by Assyria, persecution by Babylon, persecution even by those enemies around during the Medo-Persian rule. Persecution eventually from the Greeks, as we're reading on Sunday, during even the Maccabees. That bickering between the Ptolemaic and the Seleucid kingdom, they're always persecuted. Rome eventually, despite their covenant, persecuted. These people have been persecuted their whole life. So Russia finally said, we're going to have to deal with this. How are they going to deal with it? They're going to put them through school. That's how you do. That's how you wipe out. That's how you defeat a nation without firing a shot. You think people are stupid? The net results of the Russian experiment didn't turn out as expected. Education for non-Jewish children was not compulsory. The Jews became the best educated segment in Russia. What happened? They said, we're going to fix those Jews. We're going to put them in school. And we're going to beat out of them that religious notion that they're different. We're going to din into them our ideals, our ideologies. Now, real quick, I'll just stop there just for the sake of this. Let me bring this up. Who are the greatest proponents, or who are what group of people are probably the main supporters of gay rights? Jewish people. Now wait a minute. How'd that happen? Like, we know what happened when the civil rights movement was happening in the South. There was a whole bunch of white people from the North who came down to help. Who were they? They were Jewish. Good portion of Jewish. A lot of white people. By the way, you know when Lincoln made his Emancipation Proclamation, do you know who actually was, or what group of people were proponents for ending slavery? It's Jews. Now, wait a minute. Now, as we consider all these things, when we talk about women's groups and certain ethnicities that support these Jewish people, how did the Jews suddenly go from Russia, unable to be bent, to a way of life today that literally goes against every aspect of the Torah? Because the Torah condemns homosexuality. The Torah condemns divorce, wholesale divorce, even of a Jewish man with a Jewish woman for the sake of marrying even a Gentile, but they could care less. We were reading last week out of Death of the West, and this becomes important. A lot of people, they really hate this guy, but you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And we were reading about how one of the reasons the West didn't fall was because of the structure that was in place during the revolution. In Russia, when Russia had the opportunity for the workers to rise up the way Karl Marx had intended them to, it didn't happen. They never took their place. And the reason why they never took their place was because they felt that Christianity had been too far embedded into them. The structure of the West is based on Christianity. Now, what's the best way to root out a Christian culture from a society? Huh? Put the kids in school. Now, the devil ain't stupid. If something works, he keeps doing it. If something works, the devil just keeps doing the same thing. And unfortunately for us, we just keep sending them. Now, let's pick up where we left off. There's quite a bit that I'd like to go over here, but we're only going to highlight a few things like we did in Pawns in the Game. We'll start here. It's in chapter 3. It's called the Catechism of a Revolution. Now, this movement is actually referred to by Pat Buchanan as a new religion. And it's no doubt because it actually is. What does this new religion, this new faith that came on the wings of the revolution hold and teach? How does it differ from the old? Well, first, this new faith is of and by and for this world alone. It refuses to recognize any higher moral order or moral authority. As for the next world, it will happily yield that to Christianity and traditional faith, so long as they stay out of the public square and out of the public schools. As for old biblical stories of creation, Adam and Eve, the serpent in the garden, the original sin, expulsion from Eden, Moses on Mount Sinai, the Ten Commandments being written in some stone and binding it on all men, believe all that if you wish, but it's never again to be taught as truth. For the truth, as discovered by Darwin and confirmed by science, is that our species and world are remarkable results of eons of evolution. Science affirms that human species is an emergence from evolutionary forces, declares the Humanist Manifesto written in 1973. The picture on the wall in biology class of apes walking on four legs, then two, then evolving to Homo erectus, This is what happened. The new gospel has, as its governing axioms, there is no God. There are no absolutes in the universe. The supernatural is superstition. All life begins and ends here. It is object and human happiness that only in the world that we shall never know. Each society establishes its own moral code for the time. Each man and woman has a right to do the same. As happiness is life's end, we are rational beings. We have the right to decide when pain of living outweighs the pleasure of living, and to this end, either by ourselves or with the assistance of family and doctors. It's talking about the right to die. In the moral realm, the first commandment is all lifestyles are equal. And this is something that we've gone over quite a few times. There is no equality. There never was. But this is a deception. All lifestyles are equal. Love and its natural concomitant sex are healthy and good. All voluntary sexual relations are permissible, and they are morally equal. It's no one's business but one's own, and certainly not the business of the state to prohibit. This principle that all lifestyles are equal is to be written into law. All those who refuse to respect the new law are to be punished. To disrespect an alternative lifestyle marks one as a bigot. Discrimination against those who adopt an alternative lifestyle is a crime. Homophobia, not homosexuality, is the evil that must be eradicated. Thou shalt not be judgmental is the second commandment. But the revolution is not only judgmental, it's severe on those who violate the first commandment. How do you defend this apparent double standard? According to the catechism of this revolution, the old Christian moral code that condemned sex outside of marriage and held homosexuality to be unnatural and immoral was rooted in prejudice, biblical bigotry, religious dogma, and barbaric tradition. That repressive and cruel Christian code was an impediment to human fulfillment and happiness and responsible for the ruin of countless lives, especially those of gay men and women. The new moral code is based on enlightened reason and respect for all. When the state wrote the Christian moral code into law, it codified bigotry. When we write our moral code into law, we advance the frontiers of freedom and protect the rights of persecuted minorities. Now, how many black people like the idea that gays call their movement a civil rights movement, like the black movement? Huh? Now, when the blacks actually marched, didn't Martin Luther King use the Bible? Didn't they use statements even referred to by Jefferson and Madison that God had created men equal? So there were references made that this isn't right before God. Can the gays do that? But they do. Under the new catechism, use of public schools to indoctrinate children in Judeo-Christian beliefs is strictly forbidden. But public schools can and should be used to indoctrinate children in tolerance of lifestyles, appreciation of reproductive freedom, respect for other cultures, and desirability of racial, ethnic, and religious diversity. In the new schools, the holy days of Easter week commemorating the Passion, Crucifixion, Resurrection of Christ are out as holidays. Earth Day, where the children are taught to love, preserve, and protect Mother Earth, is our day of atonement and reflection. No child is exempt. Environmentalism, wrote the conservative scholar Robert Nisbet, is well on the way to being the third great wave of redemptive struggle in Western history. The first being Christianity, the second is modern socialism. The Cultural Revolution is not about creating a level playing field for all faiths. It's about a new moral hegemony. After all the Bible's books, symbols, and pictures and commandments and holidays have been purged from the public schools, these schools shall be converted into learning centers of the new religion. Here is John Dunphy writing with refreshing candor in 1983 in The Humanist about the new role of the American public schools. And this is what he writes. The battle for humankind's future must be fought and won in the public school classroom. Now listen, people don't understand this, but these people are for real. We've been reading that these people are serious, and nobody listens. In 1983, in The Humanist, this is what John Dunphy writes. The battle for humankind's future must be fought and won in the public school classroom by teachers who correctly perceive their role as proselytizers of a new faith, a religion of humanity. The teachers must embody the same selfless dedication as the most rabid fundamentalist preachers. How you like that? Huh? For they will be ministers of another sort, utilizing the classroom instead of a pulpit to convey humanist values in whatever subject they teach. The classroom must and will become the arena of conflict between the old and the new, the rotting corpse of Christianity, together with its adjacent evils and misery, and the new faith of humanism, resplendent on its promise of a world in which the never realized Christian ideal of love thy neighbor will finally be achieved. Now, how many like that? I'm reading out of the subheading, The Cancer of Human History. But a religion needs devils as well as angels, and as much of that the new faith teaches stems from a hatred of what is viewed as shameful, wicked, and criminal past. to the Revolution, Western history is a catalog of crimes: slavery, genocide, colonialism, imperialism, atrocities, massacres committed by nations that profess to be Christian. The white race is the cancer of human history, wrote Susan Sontag, a birth mother of the Revolution in 1967. The white race, and it alone, eradicates autonomous civilizations wherever it spreads. America was founded on genocide. This is a passionately racist country. The truth is that Mozart, Pascal, Boolean, algebra, Shakespeare, parliamentary government, Baroque churches, Newton, the emancipation of women, Kant, Marx, Balanchine, ballots, don't redeem what this particular civilization has wrought upon the world. So what's it saying? What are they trying to teach? What is this whole new movement? That whitey is the cancer of human history. Now listen, as churchmen, you know better. Where did the gospel come from? From Palestine, from the region of God's people. The migration moved north and west into Europe, fulfilled even through the Anglos and the Saxons, through Britain. Again, Manasseh jumping the wall, the U.S., pushing with its horns as far west as can go, even to the extent that they took Alaska, Hawaii, colonizing even part of the Samoan Islands, Guam, pushed as far west as they could. Now, let's be honest. I guess Whitey had to get rid of the Indians if this was going to be his new land, huh? But tell me what country, tell me what people didn't displace somebody to form their nation. Huh? Threw the Indians on reservations. Did Whitey do that? Yeah. Push the Mexicans out and take California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas? Yeah. Was Mozart a white guy? Yeah. Shakespeare a white guy? Yeah. But it says, doesn't matter what all these white guys do, it can't redeem Whitey. Now, you know on the East Coast, they don't celebrate Washington's birthday. In fact, we don't celebrate Washington's birthday anymore. They just call it President's Day. Huh? Now see, you can't say it's Washington's birthday anymore, but you can say Martin Luther King Day. Right? Now, why is it okay to say this is Martin Luther King Day, but you can't say this is Washington's birthday or Lincoln's birthday? Because despite the fact that Lincoln emancipated slaves, he's still a white guy. And white people are evil. Now, if white people are evil, from where come the gospel? And if white people are evil, where are these Benjamite light bearers? See, I'm just telling you from a Christian perspective where this country's headed. You know, black people have understood, and even they have a name for a condition when white people come up and say, I knew some black people, and they were real good. My great-great-grandfather, he married a black woman, and they call that the white man's burden. Y'all know about that, right? And, you know, every time I met white people, they'd come and say, I had some good friends, they were Mexican. Like if they have to explain to me something. I'm Spanish. You know, I got some Cherokee in me. Man, my relatives are from the Iroquois tribe. And I'm looking at them, freckle-faced, white, like, man, shut up. Why are white people ashamed of their legacy? And if a white person becomes ashamed of their legacy, what do they have to transfer to their kids? Now, let's tell the honest truth. Let's tell the truth. In the last 1,000 years, who has contributed greatly or the greatest in civilization? Who landed on the moon? Huh? Let's even touch on subjects we don't want to touch on. I mean, they brought the slaves, but who emancipated them? White people. I mean, granted, the white man has made errors, but when called on it, have they at least turned? See, nobody wants to talk about this because as long as we got a grudge, as long as we want to beat up Whitey, what's happening to our society? See, if the devil can rob your identity, if the system can break down your identity, if the system can take away that which buttresses the nation, that's how you can drop the nation without firing a single shot. I'm not as worried about terrorists. You know, that's why I told you, I was kind of happy, and I said this, that with the World Trade Center bombings, as tragic as that situation was, one thing that made me happy was, as a nation, we hated somebody again. As a nation, we said, we hate them. But no sooner than the Afghans or these Arabs did this, white people were protesting on campuses. Stop the war, stop it. What are these white people doing? And what convinced them to do this? And why does this only happen on campuses? Because that's where their minds are bent. You imagine paying for your kid to go off to college only to get screwed up like that? Let's read a little more. So how do you take a nation? How do you dissuade a nation? How did the Russians want to change the Jews? You take away their heritage through school. Right? Now, what are they really? Whitey's the cancer of human history, we find out. Bad Whitey. All right. Was the novelist James Baldwin's view of this country at the end of his life? Wasn't this what his view was? There is not in American history, he wrote, nor is there now a single American institution which is not a racist institution. How many of you heard that? Everything in America is racist. Johnny Cochran said nothing in this country happens apart from race. Now, people believe that. Listen, I'm going to tell you what, we're having church that has nothing to do with race, has everything to do with Jesus. Listen, if I go to the store and buy Pepsi, it has nothing to do with race. Now, Spike Lee might say, yeah, but there was no black man making that Coke. See, there's going to be some idiots all the time who got something to say about that. But does everything in America literally have some racial bias or some racial hatred behind it? Huh? Now, listen, I'm not telling you that, because I've actually dealt with it. Have people not treat you right because of the color of your skin? I know that exists. But is that the norm? Are most people in this country bigots? Most people in this country racist? Most people in this country closet Ku Klux Klansmen? So he asked the question. He says, there is not in American history, he wrote, nor is there now a single American institution which is not a racist institution. In her progressive constitutionalism, Robin West adds, the political history of the United States is in a large measure a history of almost unthinkable brutality toward slaves, genocidal hatred of Native Americans, racist devaluation of non-whites and non-white culture, sexual devaluation of women. Now, this is what they teach in school. Now, let me ask you a question. What about Christianity? Deconstructionalist Jonathan Culler says that the Bible must be understood not as poetry or narrative, but as a powerfully influential racist and sexist text. Such sentiments are no longer... Now, let me ask you a question. While all this is happening, where's the church? Where's the church? Bunch of good-for-nothing, worthless. In 1990, Tulane announced a new program, Initiatives for the Race and Gender Enrichment of Tulane University. University President Eamon Kelly explained the urgency. Racism and sexism are pervasive in America and are fundamentally present in all American institutions. Do you know where racism actually grows the most in this nation? In university campuses. That's where it comes from. See, university campus says it spills in. But people go in not racist, come out racist. We're all the progeny of racist and sexist America. Now listen, how come nobody stands up and says, screw you, this is America, the greatest nation on the planet? Listen, let's just really quickly just take a quick test. Is America the greatest nation on the planet? Is it the greatest nation on the planet? Did America do some things wrong? Yes. Is it still the greatest nation on the planet? Huh? This is no doubt the greatest Christian nation the world has ever known. Founded in Christian beliefs, founded under God. Now, is it true that even the founding fathers had slaves? Yes. Were they wrong? Yes. Now, let me ask you a question. Did the prophets in the Bible preach against sin? But did they sin? Oh, gee. That's nothing new, is it? Say, we don't want anything to do with America, and we don't want anything to do with that Constitution, because the fellows that wrote it owned slaves. Now, can God direct you to do something? Can God direct a nation in its birth and in its genesis, despite the flaws of the humans who partook of it? Let me ask you this. When the church began, who did he pick to do it? John the Apostle of Love? Or was it big mouth, chop off the ear, can't hit the head with a sword Peter? Huh? He used the most flawed vessel of all of them. You got people who don't want to participate. Do you know you don't have to say the Pledge of Allegiance in school anymore? I hate basketball players who take all these greenback dollars on their contract with pictures of presidents on them, and then they sit down during the national anthem because they say, it ain't justice for all. Well, he should stand up because there's money for him. Because it wouldn't happen in any other country. And you don't know darn well, if somebody didn't come over to this country, he'd probably still be climbing trees where he lived. Now, when you're 6'7", you don't have to climb too high. But why do we sit and watch this? And where's the church? Well, let's read. A recent New York State Regents report on curriculum reform underscores the need for a fresh look at American history. African American, Asian Americans, Puerto Ricans, Latinos, and Native Americans have all been victims of cultural oppression and stereotyping that has characterized institutions of the European American world for centuries. So not only is it America, but it's Europe. Now let me ask you a question. Listen, I'm here, Latino, even though I hate that word, because I don't know what the hell a Latino is. I guess in Italian, since they were Latins over there, they're Latinos. I guess blonde-looking, big, tall, white dudes like Ricky Martin, they're Latinos. You can be Puerto Rican, black, and be a Latino. Let's take a quick test. It says here that we're all victims of cultural oppression and stereotyping by institutions. Anybody here denied your house because you're black, brown, white? Anybody here can't work, make money because of black, brown, white, Chinese? Is there anybody here that can't partake of America because of their color of their skin? This is the message children receive in college and even high school. European and Americans are guilty of genocide against native peoples of the continent. Well, who ain't guilty of that? Huh? Didn't the Japanese do that to the Manchurian Chinese? Didn't the Turks do that to the Armenians? Huh? Didn't the Germans do it to the Poles? Who doesn't do this? Hey, listen, I'll be the first to admit it. Man, the Aztecs killed each other. It shouldn't surprise you that Mexican gangs fight each other and kill each other. They've been doing that before Cortez. See, everybody blames Whitey for everything. Whitey didn't do nothing. You know, the Pope even apologized. Because he says, there should never have been priests with those conquistadors. What? The only reason brown guys like me got the gospel, got the call of God, is because the conquistadors brought the priests. And even if they didn't bring the priest, you had conquistadors like Cortez who got so scared when they saw stacks of skulls and high priests of the Aztecs literally eating the hearts of the victims. He got so scared, oh, Mary, help me. How many know when you're amongst the people that eat folk, you're going to start praying. You know, among the minority communities in our country, they got the higher murder rates among each other. What does Whitey have to do with that? Somebody says, well, because he didn't give me a $15 an hour job. So that's why we didn't go to school, and that's why we kill each other. Now, what are we doing? What does this have to do with the gospel? This has everything to do with the gospel, because what we're getting at is the same story. Every time God's people came to another country and allowed their culture to be broken down by the culture of the conquering nation, what happened to them? They worshipped other gods. Literally, without firing a shot, you can revolutionize the whole nation. Now listen, I don't know about you. We talked about this when we talked about the Rockefeller Foundation. We talked about how these institutions with money, and you start reading where you start reading about the NAACP, and you start reading about all these minority organizations that literally are funded by these white organizations. Isn't that I'm still amazed that white people can give black people money so they can stand up and say, honky cracker. I just can't get over that. They can give Hispanic organizations money so they can stand up and say, y'all stole Texas from us. For the life of me, I don't understand that. Now, and the more we parrot these statements, the more we become a part of the problem in the erosion, not of what people refer to as a white America, but America. Because like it or lump it, America was white. Now, people don't like that, do they? How come people get mad when somebody says that? And if we mention America was white, some white guy will stand up, not a black guy, not a brown guy, not a Chinese guy, but a white guy will stand up and say, yeah, America started was white, but look what we did to the red man. And then they'll say something like, and the red man was just a peaceful man living amongst the buffaloes and talking to trees and worshiping the rivers, and the white man came along and just started killing buffaloes for fun and eradicating and trashing the environment and broke the hearts of the Indian people who worshiped the landscape. How do you think the Indians got territories? Huh? How come Indian tribes, some were bigger than others and some were fiercer than others? How come some Indians said, hey, we'll join up with Whitey, and other Indians wanted to kill everybody? But some white person jumps up and says, yeah, America started out white. Now listen, let's come into agreement with something. We don't need history books here. But when America was founded, when that boat landed on Plymouth Rock, what color were they? Where were they from? England. And when you read the Mayflower Compact, when you read the statements that were written on Plymouth Rock, they all started out by the grace of God, by the mercy of God. When they established those 13 colonies as a nation, and Madison began to pen out this great Declaration of Independence, this Constitution, along with his contemporaries, these were white people. In fact, there was only one Catholic among them. But all the rest were Protestants. White. And their ideal was a nation under God. Now, if suddenly we begin to say, yeah, those white Europeans were bad. In fact, before we even get there, let's get here. Figure 1776. How old are we now? And about how old? 226 years old. We're a nation that's 226 years old. Do you know that in 226 years, this country has accomplished more than probably every nation combined in history? Do you know that? Now, people don't like to hear that. Do you know, despite the... Now, let me ask you this. If we really hate Indians, as Americans, if we really hate other people, why do we feed the world? Huh? Why do our soldiers patrol borders in Europe, the Orient, Central America? Why, if we hate people? America began white, and it established or set into motion the greatest governmental social experiment on the planet, a government that exists on paper because you don't trust the power of a king or a man. And from this government sprung what we know as America. Now, when people, now think about this. If you begin to literally deconstruct the legacy of our country, what will the kids ever have to fight for? Huh? They blow up Pearl Harbor. Everybody signed up. You didn't need a draft, right? They blow up the Twin Towers, and everybody protests. No war, no war, no. What the hell is wrong with them? How did that happen? But the kids in school. Thomas Sowell, Inside American Education. It deals with, first of all, I'm not going to read that. People might get mad. Second chapter is impaired faculties, talking about the educational level of teachers. No, but I'll read my notes at the end of the chapter. The most susceptible segment of people are teachers. They thus become the agents by which propaganda is spread to a captive audience that is too young to decide truthfully the validity of a dogma. They, the teachers, fall for anything. Their job is not educating anymore, it's brainwashing. A teacher by ideal believes that there is a role to effectively affect children through the medium of teaching. This ideal allows them a vision of social engineering, of socially engineering the future by controlling the minds of children. Conclusion: if the teachers and professors are empty-headed people who score the lowest on SATs, get educated in the least academic field of academia, teachers are in many cases the most gullible professionals, incapable of the mental capacity necessary to carry out the noble profession. Chapter 3 starts out. It's called Classroom Brainwashing. Many parents wonder why they lose their children to a whole new value system. Agendas forced on kids disguised as education. Variety of courses and programs under an even wider variety of names have been set up in schools across the country to change the values, behavior, and beliefs of American youngsters from what they've been taught by their families, their churches, social groups in which they've grown up. Now, what is the initial agenda? It's to separate the kids from what their dads teach them, from what the church teaches them, and from what the Bible teaches. Now, why would anybody want to do that? Now, remember what we were talking about. If you can remove from the Jews their identifying with persecution from God, from Abraham, what happens? You swallow them up, right? The reason the proletariat movement in Russia didn't happen was because rather than the workers to rise up, they found the problem was that Christianity had been in that part of the world so long, you couldn't get it out of them. So the way to take down the West is to take down that which it's structured around, and that is what? Christianity. America was built on what? Christianity. Don't let people lie to you. They left, literally England, because they hated the king, they hated the government, but they also left because they were being persecuted. They're Presbyterians. They were now Anglicans. We learned in school they left to escape religious persecution. They're Presbyterians, man. They weren't Anglican. A variety of courses and programs under even wider variety of names have been set up in schools across the country to change the values, behavior, and beliefs of American youngsters from what they've been taught by their families, churches, social groups in which they've grown up. These ambitious attempts to reshape attitudes and consciousness of a generation are as pervasive as they are little known, partly because they keep a low profile, but more often because they're called by other high-sounding names. It's called values clarification. We're going to teach a kid how to value clarify. We're going to teach them decision-making. Effective education. We're going to take them on a quest. We're going to teach them drug prevention, sex education, gifted and talented programs, and many other imaginative titles. The particular door through which such programs enter the school curriculum is far less important than what they do after they've gained entrance. Drug prevention and sex education might seem very different activities, and a program for gifted and talented students is even more different from both of these. But that is true. You know, and I hate to tell you, I don't even want to say this, but I was in what they called the MGM courses when I was a kid. And you know what while everybody else was doing stuff, we were reading novels. We were reading Orwell's 1984. I was reading, what's that dumb book? Everybody got to read it. Some of you remember Per Hansa, Brave New World? We're reading all this junk, right? And it wasn't until I'm 40 years old that I realized they were shaping my brain. They were giving me books to read to shape my brain and to shape my thinking. Not everybody gets to read this, Daniel. There's just a select few of you that get this. Not everybody gets this level of education. Take advantage of it. I found that stuff so repulsive that one of the professors came and he said, you know what, I got something that's going to relate to you. And he literally went out and got me. Back then, when I was in school, it was the Chicano movement. So he went and got me these books on Reyes Tijerina, you know, and the courthouse raid and how they framed him. And he got me this book called Chicano. Going to teach us how the white man oppressed us so I can become a good victim like everybody else. And after he got me reading, man, they started giving me all the other stuff. I'm just telling you there's a reason for this. And I think you're starting to understand it and you're starting to see it. How do you literally take a nation from God? You put the kids in public school and you begin to change their ideas. Let's read. Now, Thomas Sowell. People hate him because look at him. Anybody see something different with this guy? That is not an ink spot on the page, people. Anybody know why people hate this guy? All right. So-called sex education courses. Oh, no, we got to pick up a little bit higher. Far too often, however, these words are mere flags of convenience under which the schools set sail on an uncharted sea of social experimentation in the reshaping of young people's emotions and attitudes. People who have looked beyond the labels to the concrete specifics have often discovered that the ostensible subject of special curriculum programs, drug education, sex education, etc., occupies a minor part of the textbook or class time, while psychology and values are the major preoccupation. So-called sex education courses and textbooks, for example, are seldom involve a mere conveying of biological or medical information. Far more often, the primary thrust is toward reshaping of attitudes, not only toward sex, but also toward parents, toward society, toward life. This same pattern is found in many other programs claiming to be about drug prevention, smoking prevention, or many other worthy purposes. Now, let me ask you a question. Why is this being taught to school? Don't you send your kid to learn to read, write, and do math? If anybody's going to shape his values or teach him how to act toward people, who is it? Mom and Dad. Typical of this pattern was the so-called drug prevention program in New Hampshire, which a parent found to be about 1/4 informational, while the other 3/4 deals with values, attitudes, etc. The same could be said about widely used sex education textbook called Changing Bodies, Changing Lives. Similarly, in a widely distributed book used in school anti-smoking campaigns, smoking goes unmentioned except for the inclusion in a list of many new decisions teenagers will face. North Carolina teacher testifying before the U.S. Department of Education pointed out that federally funded drug education curriculum does not emphasize any information or facts on drugs, But instead she found the curriculum, 152 pages long, yet only 4 pages makes any mention of drugs, either directly or indirectly. The program is divided into 3 phases. The first phase is self-awareness, followed by a series of exercises that permit students to gain a wider understanding and appreciation of their values as autonomous individuals. If these programs are often not what they claim to be, then what are they? That's the big question, isn't it? They are attempts to reshape values, attitudes, beliefs to fit a different vision of the world from what children have received from their parents and social environment in which they are raised. Now, why would anybody want to do that to your kids? Huh? How many of you know that if somebody stood up and announced revolution, our generation would shoot it down? Huh? Let me ask, let's go another way. If somebody stood up like they did, they try to pass a law, say same-sex marriages, what did people say? No. What's going to happen in 10 years? Why? What's the difference? Kids have been taught. Huh? All I can say, I'm glad I ain't going to be here. Now, again, you might say, why is this relevant? Well, let me put it this way. We're finding out how the devil works. You can't crumble Europe. The Russians found. Marx found out. Marx failed. The reason they failed was because Europe was entrenched in 2,000 years of Christianity. The U.S. or the West, which basically represents the greatest power the world's ever known. 226 years. The West or the U.S. Why is it so hard to topple the U.S.? Huh? Why? Because it's got such a great root of Christianity. Now, Europe right now is the withering old man that y'all know what I think about the French, but that whole French attitude is spread across Europe. Everybody's too afraid to say anything. There's tolerance for everybody now. Europe is declining quickly, but what have they done? In fact, the Pope even made a statement concerning, I think only a quarter of Europe said they were good Catholics. They're in trouble, aren't they? So if you can get rid of Christianity, what happens? Then you can take over Europe. If you can knock out Christianity in the U.S., now, let me ask you a question. How do you knock out Christianity in the U.S.? Here's how you do it. You knock out whitey. Because who brought it? You ever hear black people say, that's the white man's religion? How do you knock out Christianity in the West? You knock out whitey, you badmouth America, because America is based on what? Christianity, on the belief of God, right? Like the Boy Scouts, God, country, and honor, right? Now, by the way, you know the Boy Scouts are bigots now, right? They didn't want homosexual camp leaders, right? I don't want any kids I know to go to camp with some homosexual. In fact, for that matter, I don't want no, heterosexual choir boy in a Catholic church with a gay priest either. We know what happens there, huh? 2 candy bars and a Coke. Oh, some of you know that joke, huh? Now, returning to the Bible. In order to take Europe, what do you have to do? Take out Christianity. In order to take the U.S., what do you have to do? Take out Christianity. In order for Antichrist to manifest, what do you have to do? Take out the body of Christ. The Antichrist cannot manifest till that which restraineth is taken out of the way. The only thing that is restraining this world system from fully taking over Europe and the U.S. is what? Christianity. Holy Ghost-filled saints. This is why I hate evangelicals. They're right up there with French. These evangelicals have stood by and watched this crap happen and keep their mouths shut. Because that whole evangelical movement, seeking to find themselves relevant, they say, well, things are changing. What do you think of that neutral gender Bible that says, and the Lord God she, and the Lord God he, and they share it intermittently not to offend anybody? And the evangelicals go, well, maybe. Huh? Man, I hate those guys. Somebody emailed me a little gerbil in a blender, and he floats around in there, and he challenges you to push the buttons by saying, you don't got the balls. I wish there was a gerbil for evangelicals like that. All right, let's go on. If these programs are often not what they claim to be, what are they then? They're attempts to reshape values, attitudes, beliefs to fit a very different vision of the world from what the children have received from their parents and their social environment, which they're. Now, what do you think of sending your kid to school knowing that there is an agenda to separate your kid's mind from everything you taught him is right, wrong, acceptable, not acceptable, righteous, unrighteous, what is sin and what is not? What do you think about that? Now, some people say, well, I don't see it. So how come you don't have Washington's birthday? Well, I don't see it. How come they don't have to say the Pledge of Allegiance anymore? Oh, I don't see it. Well, how come they don't sing America the Beautiful? Well, I don't see it. Do you know that I think it was Harvard 2 weeks ago, they had to convene and they said American history is no longer a prerequisite to graduate. Now, if you don't teach American history, what happens? You lose any semblance of who you are. You lose your identity. Listen, I don't care what color you are, black, white, red, green, pink, or blue. The fact that we were born and raised in this great nation, our identity comes from history. And if suddenly you don't have to learn it, what happens? Now listen, here's what happens. Now again, I don't like the idea that white foundations give black foundations, brown foundations, Chinese foundation, gay foundation. I don't like the idea that these people give these groups money so they can stand up and say honky cracker, thieves, homophobes. I don't like this idea, but isn't it a worse feeling to know that you're a puppet and that every time we scream, discrimination, this country sucks, this country doesn't give justice for all, every time we scream that stuff, we're doing nothing more than to further the agenda of the Antichrist? Some people would have nothing else to live for if they couldn't say that stuff. Yeah, especially Jesse. Instead of educating the intellect, these special curriculum programs condition the emotions. Now, the emotions become priority in school. This sometimes is called effective education, as distinguished from intellectual education. It's also called brainwashing. A variety of programs used in classrooms across the country not only share the general goals of brainwashing, that is, changing fundamental attitudes, values, beliefs by psychological conditioning methods, but also use the classic brainwashing techniques developed in totalitarian countries. Isn't that something? Now, how do you teach a teacher to do that? You have seminars. I was laughing. I was talking to a teacher from the Compton Unified who told me that a white woman from UCLA came to Compton District to teach black women how to teach black kids. Now, everybody knows that black people, on the average, have more children than white people. These women have raised more kids than this 25-year-old white girl coming out of UCLA with a master's. And a white person's going to come teach black people how to teach black people? Huh? But do you know what this white girl's teaching, though? Oh, you poor folk, we all wronged you. And we're real sorry. And you're all victims. And you all need our help. Isn't that something that they use? Now, how do you get a teacher to teach brainwashing or use brainwashing techniques on kids? It goes, let me just read these before we jump. They use emotional stress, shock, desensitization to break down intellectual and emotional resistance. This is why I remember when I was in school, they showed me women having babies. They showed us dead people. They showed us stuff like that to desensitize us. That was no big thing. They use isolation, physical or emotional, from familiar sources with emotional support or resistance. Cross-examination of pre-existing values. They'll question you. If your kid says, I believe in God, it's none of the teacher's business to say, oh, what religion are you? Why would a teacher even, what's their business to even ask? Stripping the individual of normal defenses such as reserve, dignity, sense of privacy, the ability to decline or participate. They reward them. Acceptance of new attitudes, beliefs, reward which can simply be a release from the pressures inflicted on those who resist or make other tangible symbolic forms. Let's see.